I'm David Toman, author of nootropicsexpert.com, and in this video I'm going to share with you what I know about St. John's wort as a nootropic, what it is, why we use it, the science behind it, dosage, and side effects. St. John's wort is regarded as a wildflower, herb, and weed. As a nootropic, St. John's wort is considered a powerful antidepressant. St. John's wort is native to Europe, but can be found growing wild throughout Asia, Africa, North and South America, and Australia. Greek physicians Galen and Dioscorides prescribed St. John's wort as a diuretic for healing wounds and for treating menstrual disorders. In the Middle Ages, it was used as a talisman to ward off evil spirits. St. John's wort is best harvested on St. John's Day, or June 24th, when the herb is in peak bloom. Legend has it that if you placed a sprig of the herb under your pillow on St. John's Eve, St. John's himself may appear in a dream and bless you for another year. Now, I'm not sure if this applies if you put a bottle of St. John's wort extract under your pillow, but it's worth a try. St. John's wort was first crossed the radar of modern herbalists and naturopaths in 1997. A study published in the British Medical Journal entitled St. John's wort for Depression, an overview and meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials pushed it to superstar herbal antidepressant status. This meta-analysis of 23 previously published studies of St. John's wort was drawn from foreign medical journals. The analysis showed that overall, St. John's wort was significantly superior to placebo and was as effective as a pharmaceutical antidepressants. The British Medical Journal published another study in 2001 showing that St. John's wort was equally effective in treating depression and better tolerated than the widely prescribed antidepressant Paxil. Two major active constituents of St. John's wort are hypericin and hyperforin. This plant contains a total of 7 groups of medicinally active compounds. Now, researchers have extensively documented St. John's wort as an antidepressant, antiviral, antioxidant, anti-cancer, and its antibacterial effects. The most recent clinical studies show that hyperforin is the constituent in St. John's wort that has the most antidepressant action. Now, if you've had limited success using St. John's wort for depression and anxiety, your choice of supplement may be the problem. A little bit later on in this video for St. John's wort dosage notes, I'll tell you a little bit more about what extracts work best. Well, first, St. John's wort reduces depression. Hyperforin is the major antidepressive constituent of St. John's wort. Hyperforin inhibits the uptake of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine in the brain. By making more of each of these neurotransmitters available in the brain, mood is elevated and depressive symptoms decline. Clinical trials also demonstrate that the level of antidepressant effect of St. John's wort extract is entirely dependent on the concentration of hyperforin. A study in Berlin compared the efficacy of using St. John's wort extract, called WS-5570, to Paxil in treating moderate to severe depression. In this multi-center, randomized, double-blind study, 130 patients received 900 milligrams or 1,800 milligrams per day of St. John's wort, or 40 milligrams of Paxil. The study showed that St. John's wort and Paxil were equally effective in preventing relapse of continuation of treatment after recovery from moderate to severe depression, and that St. John's wort was an important alternative treatment option for long-term prevention of depression. And second, St. John's wort reduces stress. St. John's wort is licensed in Germany to treat anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders. But scientists and researchers are still working on what in this plant actually provides the anxiolytic effects. The anti-anxiety effects of St. John's wort has been attributed to the binding affinity of at least 10 different extracts of the herb, including extracts with things like hypericin, flavonoids, xanthines, and bioflavonoids for adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, GABA-A, GABA-B, and glutamine receptors, as well as the inhibition of monoamine oxidase A and B activity, and the synaptic uptake of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. All we know for sure at this point is that St. John's wort works to help alleviate some forms of anxiety. One German study ran a multi-center, randomized, placebo-controlled 6-week trial comparing the efficacy of St. John's wort extract of 600 milligrams a day and a placebo in 151 patients that were suffering from anxiety. The data from the study shows that St. John's wort extract, called LI-160, is superior in effectiveness in controlling anxiety symptoms, and tolerability of the extract was excellent. St. John's wort inhibits synaptic uptake in your brain of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine with approximately equal affinity. Research shows that St. John's wort also has an affinity for ATP, GABA, and glutamate receptors, and in the lab, scientists discovered it downregulates beta adrenergic receptors and upregulates serotonin receptors. Adrenergic receptors are a class of G protein receptors that are the targets of the catecholamines like norepinephrine and epinephrine, also called adrenaline. This upregulation and downregulation of neurotransmitter concentrations are in areas of the brain implicated in depression. And finally, neuroendocrine studies show that St. John's wort is involved in the regulation of genes that control HPA axis function and also continuing the antidepressant action of this herb. Much of the therapeutic activity is attributed to St. John's wort active phytochemical ingredients hypericin, hyperforin, and several flavonoids. This novel mechanism of action is unlike any other single pharmaceutical antidepressant or nootropic and underlies St. John's wort's profound effect on depression. St. John's wort also has strong antibacterial and antiviral properties. St. John's wort inhibits tumor cell growth. Research shows that St. John's wort extract decreases oxidative stress and prevents neurotoxicity and inflammation, and may be an effective treatment for oxidative stress-related neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. St. John's wort shows promise as an anti-inflammatory, and thousands of years of clinical use shows St. John's wort works as a wound healing agent. And St. John's wort even helps reduce the effects of opiate dependence by reducing withdrawal symptoms, and it's handy if you're coming off of opiates. If you had problems using SSRI prescription antidepressant, St. John's wort extract may be a good option for you. St. John's wort does not produce the same side effects as pharmaceutical antidepressants. And sex drive is not affected. There's no withdrawal symptoms when you stop using St. John's wort. Users of St. John's wort extract say it often works sooner than expected and gets better over time. St. John's wort extract helps provide better focus and fewer OCD symptoms. Users report an end to procrastination, less irritation, and a better mood. St. John's wort extract takes the edge off situations that would normally stress you. Feelings of anxiety are less or non-existent. Women going through menopause report feeling more emotionally stable when using St. John's wort extract. Mood swings are no longer an issue. And if you are dealing with PTSD, you may find that St. John's wort extract will put a stop to the rage, and long-term depression could be a distant memory. If you are sure your depression is caused by a serotonin imbalance, you should feel the mood-lifting effects of St. John's wort. But neuroscience is a complicated subject, and everyone's body and wiring is different. St. John's wort does not work for all types of depression or anxiety. If your depression is caused by a hormone imbalance, a depleted microbiome, an issue with dopamine levels, or other neuroreceptor issues, you may not experience the benefit of St. John's wort. And please, please, do not combine St. John's wort with prescription antidepressants. Serotonin Syndrome is real and could kill you, literally. Now I'm going to talk for a minute about the politics of treatment for depression. Most clinical studies using St. John's wort for depression have been conducted in Europe, and were targeted cases in mild to moderate depression. But then came a study done at Vanderbilt University in 2001, which made headline news and created a ton of controversy. And this study discredited the herb's use in treating patients with major depression. And I'm including this study in this video to draw your attention to why we cannot always rely on clinical studies when we study nootropics' efficacy in brain optimization, and why the nootropics community often resorts to personal experience and the reviews of other neurohackers. This blind, placebo-controlled trial worked with 200 outpatients around 42 years old who were diagnosed with major depression. The patients were randomly assigned to receive either 900 milligrams per day of St. John's wort extract or a placebo for 4 weeks. And if they did not respond, the dose was raised to 1,200 milligrams per day or a placebo for another 8 weeks. The researchers concluded there was no significant change in patient depression scores, and that St. John's wort was no better than placebo for treating major depression. Their conclusion? St. John's wort was not effective for treatment of major depression. Now, I bring this study up for one reason. The study was funded by Pfizer, the pharmaceutical manufacturer of Zoloft, the leading synthetic antidepressant medication. In 2015, the FDA in the U.S. pushed Pfizer to modify the safety warning for Zoloft, linking Zoloft to causing heart defects in newborns. And this was in response to hundreds of lawsuits by women who say that they weren't adequately warned that Zoloft could cause defects in the newborns. Zoloft sales for Pfizer made the company $3.3 billion in 2005. Now, it seems to me that having a major pharmaceutical company funding the study of a herb that is in direct competition to one of their main profit centers is a direct conflict of interest. And there is no way that Pfizer was going to have a clinical trial show that St. John's wort was as good as or better than Zoloft. It's also interesting that the sales of St. John's wort annually in the U.S. has reached a peak of $315 million in 1998, but had declined to about $60 million in 2006. Bad press strongly affected the sales of this natural antidepressant, and yet the sales of the pharmaceutical antidepressants continue to rise. Now, I've got other more positive studies on St. John's wort and St. John's wort extract over on nootropicsexpert.com. Just go to Nootropics Expert and search for St. John's wort and click on the link below this video. I've got a very positive trial that was done in New York that used St. John's wort as a treatment for mild to moderate depression. And I've got another one that was done with St. John's wort for major depression in Germany. And I have another study that was done for St. John's wort helps obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, successfully. So the conclusion of that study was St. John's wort could be an effective treatment for OCD. So if you'd like to see more details on those clinical studies, please go to the full transcript of this video on Nootropics Expert and check them out. St. John's wort is available from local health food and vitamin stores and online. St. John's wort comes in capsules, tablet, and powder form, and it's also available as tinctures, teas, and oil-based lotions. Most St. John's wort supplements are standardized to contain 3% hypersarin. But the most recent clinical studies show that hyperforin is the constituent in St. John's wort that has the most antidepressant action. Researchers say that the benefits of St. John's wort are only applicable to standardized extracts, such as Li-160, WS5570/2, and ZE-117. So check the labels and look for Perica, which is a WS5570 extract, or Kira, which is an LA-160 extract, or New Chapter SC27, who produce their own extract. There is a report and some clinical data which suggests that that photosensitivity caused by hypericin can cause cataracts and blindness. So it's all the more reason to play it safe and go with a high-quality St. John's wort extract containing hyperforin. Now, there's a number of different recommended doses for St. John's wort depending on what you want to treat. St. John's wort for anxiety is 900 milligrams twice a day. St. John's wort for mild to moderate depression is 300 milligrams 3 times daily. St. John's wort for severe depression is 900 to 1800 milligrams daily, and so forth. Go to the original transcript of this video and check for the specific recommended dosages of St. John's wort depending on what you want to try to deal with. Side effects with St. John's wort are generally mild, but can include stomach upset, hives, skin rashes, fatigue, restlessness, headache, dry mouth, dizziness, and confusion. St. John's wort can interfere with getting pregnant and making infertility worse. It can make ADHD symptoms worse, particularly if you're using Ritalin. St. John's wort may increase the risk of psychosis in those with schizophrenia and may contribute to dementia in those with Alzheimer's. St. John's wort can interact with medications used during surgery, so if you're anticipating surgery, avoid St. John's wort. And do not take St. John's wort if you have bipolar disorder. Some St. John's wort extracts can make your skin and eyes overly sensitive to sunlight, so you should avoid sun lamps, tanning booths, and tanning beds while using a St. John's wort product containing hypericin. Now, there is some clinical data showing that St. John's wort products that contain hypericin can cause blindness. CYP3A4 is a liver enzyme whose job is to oxidize small foreign organic molecules and toxins so they can be removed from your body. Some substances, including St. John's wort and grapefruit juice, affect the enzyme CYP3A4 and can amplify or weaken the action of those drugs and nootropics. St. John's wort interacts with tricyclic, SSRI, and MAOI antidepressants. Taking St. John's wort with these medications increases their action and could cause or lead to Serotonin Syndrome, which can be deadly. Do not take St. John's wort with antidepressants, including tricyclic antidepressants, SSRIs, and MAOIs. If you want to see individual brand names and types, go to the original transcript of this video on nootropicsexpert.com. St. John's wort can reduce levels of antihistamines in your body. It can increase the risk of bleeding when combined with Plavix and birth control pills. Do not use St. John's wort with warfarin, as it can reduce its effectiveness. Drugs that suppress the immune system can lose their effectiveness with St. John's wort, and it should not be used with drugs that treat HIV and AIDS. St. John's wort can increase the sedative effect of barbiturates, benzodiazepines like Valium, and triptans that treat migraines. St. John's wort also interacts with antifungal drugs, statins, calcium channel blockers, and any other medication that is broken down by the liver, which covers a lot of drugs and nootropics. Serotonin syndrome is not to be messed with. An overload of serotonin in your brain can make you very sick and can ultimately kill you, and I am not kidding here. If you suspect anything could cause problems if it's increased or decreased in your system, do not use St. John's wort. If your goal is to treat depression and mood issues, you have many other safer options available to you. St. John's wort is available in tablet, capsule, and powder form. Most are standardized to contain 0.3% hypericin, but the most recent clinical studies show that hyperforin is the constituent in St. John's wort that has the most antidepressant action. Researchers say that the benefits of St. John's wort are only applicable to standardized extracts such as Li-160, WS 5570/2, and ZE-117. Check the labels and look for a product containing the patented extracts Perica or Kira or New Chapter SC27. St. John's wort is also available in tinctures, teas, and oil-based skin lotions. So my nootropics expert recommendation for St. John's wort extract is 900 to 1800 milligrams a day. And I do recommend using St. John's wort extract as a nootropic supplement, but with the strongest warning I have issued for any nootropic mentioned on Nootropics Expert. Do not combine St. John's wort with prescription antidepressants because the combinations can put you in serious danger of serotonin syndrome. St. John's wort can also nullify or amplify the effects of other drugs, including nootropics in your stack. This is caused by the depression or induction of certain enzymes in your liver. So please, please see the side effects portion of the original transcript for this video on nootropicsexpert.com. So that's my report on St. John's wort. If you want to see links to the studies I talked about and the warnings I talked about, go to nootropicsexpert.com and search for St. John's wort, or click on the link below this video. There you'll find a full transcript of this video, and you'll find dozens of articles on all the well-known nootropics on Nootropics Expert, including some good alternatives to St. John's wort. Now, if you've got any questions or you want to share your experience using St. John's wort, please use the comment section at the bottom of the post over on Nootropics Expert. I respond to comments and questions on Nootropics Expert usually the same day. And if you want to see more videos on all the best nootropics used today, subscribe to this channel before you leave. I'll be putting up new videos on nootropics and optimizing your brain every week. I'm David Toman, author of Nootropics Expert.